DMD registry. That is the time when you register on the DMD National Registry. Is that for who? I hope that all of you are absolutely familiar with the registry by now. But the idea is that trying to have a database to have all the information about the boys in the UK with Duchenne, and collect information both about the genetic and about the medical information. And it's important. Why is important? First, create a community. So we have this community around the registry. If a pharmaceutical company wants to perform a clinical trials in the UK, they usually contact either Duchenne or the 3MD that lead on the international registries, asking, I have these trials, and how many patients fit my criteria in the UK? If the answer is 5, probably the pharmaceutical company does not think that is cost effective. If the answer is 100, they said, oh, in that case, probably is worth to go. So, and this information are provided through the registry. The registry also allow you to be kept informed about what research. And I know that it's not working perfectly. We are doing a lot of work with Duchenne in order to improve the communication through the registry, but it's the way that we can contact family to provide information. Ideally, and I want to be open here because ideally, and we have done in the past, the registry is also used to really recruit patients in trials. So if we have a trial and we want to recruit patients, we send a letter to the boys, the family who has the boys who fit the criteria based on the registry and say, you are eligible, please contact this site. We have not been so good in that because we have a capacity term, and sometimes we have a recruitment target of 5 or 7 in the UK, and there are 50 patients in the UK, and then how do we manage that? So we are working on this, and we are working with patient organizations to try to improve this communication. But if nobody's in the registry, it's very then difficult to really reach you. So I think that is an important step. I already mentioned why it's important about the genetic counseling and the family and recurrent testing. Just because I forgot that I think this is an important component, there is now the Newcastle team in collaboration funded by PTC is developing a module with the RCPCH, so the Royal College of Child Health, to try to increase awareness of Duchenne and improve and have a more Duchenne discussed in the training of GP, health visitors, school nurses, nursery nurses, in order to improve the diagnosis, to recognize these children as early as possible. What else do you need to do? Pre-diagnosis as part of the standard of care. The only thing that probably you will be asked for is start thinking about having a general check and the baseline check. One important thing is the heart check. Israeli boys with Duchenne usually do not have heart problem until the age of 10, 12, but we know that there are some exceptions, and there are some boys who might have early cardiac involvement. And therefore we always recommend a heart check at diagnosis. If it's fine, and we can go into the regular follow-up, but if there are problems, there are good medication. And if you start medication at the right time, the probability of success is higher. And then there are other tests that I presented also yesterday. There are the pre-steroid test. Can be done at any time, so we might want to think about during this period of time to do the blood test, but there is no urgency. There are not really other things for the standard of care in the pre-symptomatic. The boy is fine. When we thought about pre-symptomatic means that you do not really have any symptoms, so there isn't anything. Concentrate on yourself and let the boy grow naturally. And sometimes that is the work to do about try to learn how to look at your boys as your boys, not like Duchenne only. That's the most difficult part. In the early non-ambulatory phase, so as the boys will start to walk, showing some weakness, usually is around the hips, and is when they start to have maybe some falls. They don't run as quick or as fast or in the same way of the other kids. They start struggling a little bit with stairs. They can still do it, but it's not like the others. Then is when probably the idea to be referred to a specific neuromuscular center and a specialized neuromuscular center is important. The specialized neuromuscular center has one duty, is to keep the care coordinated, and is applied from the early ambulatory until the late non-ambulatory. And this idea to coordinate the care, because there are several clinicians that are involved in different aspects, and it's someone who put the pieces together and ensure that everything is followed up as it should. And it's probably the people who are more familiar with the standard of care. The cardiologist, the respiratory clinician might not know really the standard of care in Duchenne because they see millions of other patients. The neuromuscular center is what should be our specialization. Part of that, you should receive genetic counseling. You will see by a pediatric neurologist or an adult neurologist later on, the physiotherapist, and is the coordination with the cardiologist and the respiratory team. We usually recommend a 6 monthly follow-up as part of the standard of care at this stage. And what we want to measure at each appointment is the muscle strength and function, is the joint mobility, so the range of movement in the joints, and specifically at this stage is around the ankles. It's about how he's doing in his daily life. It's about bone health, and it's about general family well-being. And it's the full family, not just the boy, but the full family. That is what is assessed at this stage. I wanted to spend a few just words about, because you probably, if you attend the clinic, you know that your boys does a lot of tests. And I just want, because in some clinic you will be allowed to stay in some clinic you will be asked to leave because the boys sometimes perform better without the parents around. So just to give you a very brief introduction about what these tests are. You've heard about the North Star ambulatory assessment, or ambulatory scale. That is a scale of 17 motor skills that we test. And we score 0, which means is unable to do it, or is able to do it with support. We score it 1 when he's able to do it, but adapted. And the typical thing is that when is the goer's maneuver, so they can still get up from the floor, but while an healthy child will just get up like that, the boys with Duchenne usually tend to turn and then climb up. So that is score 1. He can do it, but he's adapted. He's not a healthy child of the same age. Score 2 is when he does it exactly like what we expect for a child of his age. That is the score. 17 items, I never remember all of them, but the idea is just we mention how does he walk, can he hop, can he jump, can he get up from a chair, can he get up from the floor, can he stand on one heel, can he stand on the other one, can he go one step up, one step down. And all of these, from the top to the bottom, they become harder and harder in a way. We use this as a clinical assessment. It's very comprehensive, it's 17 items, so it's very comprehensive. We need to think about it. It's validated from the age of 4 and above, because a 3-year-old is normal that they not hop. So there are some skills that we learn with age. So we need to be careful when assessed. I think that is a very comprehensive one. I know that parents get really stressed about, oh, last time was 31 and now it's 29. What does it mean? Talk with your physiotherapist, because the meaning might be different. And we have also to think about, is one assessment once done in clinic? If they had a cold, a cough, a bad day, they've been sitting in the waiting room for 3 hours, they don't like the physiotherapist, or it would never happen, but my physiotherapists are there, so or they've never seen the physiotherapist before, and they are 5-year-old. So there are different reasons why they might not have their full scoring. So always discuss the physiotherapist and the clinician, say what does it mean. They also do the time function test. You might have heard that. They are asked to run 10 meters as fast as they can. They have to get up from the floor, and they have to get up. Here is not the right picture, I think the right picture. In some clinics, not in all of them, they ask to go up 4 steps and down 4 steps. It's an outcome in several clinical trials, but it's not always feasible to do in clinic. But it's a minor task. What at this point, so in the early ambulatory stage, is when we need to discuss about corticosteroid. And then we need to discuss about is the right time to start and which one we need to start. I had a talk yesterday about corticosteroids, so I don't want to talk about when we can have the 45 minutes on steroid, but just one point that I want to just to share with everyone. When do we recommend to start corticosteroid? Usually when we say is a plateau phase. So we don't want to start when they're still improving and are developing, like any child. They might, boys with Duchenne might start walking a little bit later, start going upstairs a little bit later, running a little bit later. But if they're still actually improving in that, they're still learning, we don't want to start steroid then. We don't want to start to wait until they show deterioration. We want to start when they are stable. That point is not a cut-off and is a black and white answer. We usually say that it's between the age of 4 and the age of 6. In the UK, I think that is more likely to be between the age of 4.5 and 5.5, but more or less between the age of 4 and 6 because the boys are different. We know that if we start early, it's more beneficial, but it's also associated with more side effects, and then I'm talking before the age of 4, and that is why we put this cut-off. And it's always a balance between benefit and side effects. And also that the boys are different, so some of them start to show some weakness at 4, other at 4.5, other at 6, and then it's when we start. What do we want to start? Well, these are the 3 most commonly prescribed cortical regimes in the UK, so daily prednisone, daily deflazacort, prednisone, tendizone, tendizone. We know that alternate day regime have been shown to be less effective than daily regime. We also know that low doses are not as effective, as much as high doses are not more effective. And the only thing that I think when you start thinking now, and it's a new thing in a way, about which corticosteroid to start and which regime, probably keep in mind about participation in clinical trials. Some clinical trials require just a stable corticosteroid regime, regardless which steroid or which regime. Other clinical trials are becoming stricter and they require one of the 3 that I mentioned. So it's a decision that you need to balance. After we start steroid, we want to see the boys 3 months after starting to monitor side effects and benefit. This, I have to say, is ideal. It's not part of the standard of care because not all centers have the capacity to do that. I would also say that if the centers cannot provide an appointment after 3 months, probably it's useful if you keep in mind and have a look after 3 months, and if you have any concern, contact the center and say, can I be seen because I'm worried. He's not improving and he's gained a lot of weight, or his behavior is totally changed. I cannot manage this boy. So it might not be a clinical appointment, but just keep an alarm to say 3 months, have an assessment between benefits and side effects in your opinion, and raise concern with the clinician. If you don't have any concern, say, okay, I can wait another 3 months and have my 6 months follow-up. What do? They should improve muscle strength and function. So what we see is that some of the boys clearly improve, so they learn to do things that they were not able to do before, like they get up from the floor more easily, or they start jumping, or they start hopping. Other, no, they don't learn anything new, but you still see that they actually have not changed anything in 6 months, so it's still a steroid effect. But also have side effects, and the one that we need to monitor is really the weight, the height, and behavior. And then we always ask for the blood pressure and the urine test to be done we usually say in clinic that they are done once in between the first 3 months to be sure that they do not have a reaction to corticosteroid and start to develop early diabetes or early hypertension, which is very, very rare, but you can just go to the GP and that's evidence done. We rarely see these symptoms and their side effects so early, but through the early ambulatory phase we might see them. At this stage, it's very important the physiotherapy input, and we've been lost. They focus on contraction prevention and exercise. I just mentioned that. For contraction prevention, is just, what does it mean? Is that we want to keep a good range of movement. Generally, boys, if you do not move a muscle, and this typically is when you break something and you don't move it, then your joint is tight, and the same is what happens in boys with Duchenne. So they are not as active, and there are some joints that tend to become tight. And if you do not do anything, the type becomes so severe that actually then you cannot, even if you stretch, you can't actually regain the full range. And that is why we want to prevent that. The stretching is done to maintain the joint mobility as much as possible. But it is an important point to say, at early stage, we need to focus, because we need to focus. If you want to do the full stretching, you will never manage to have a 5-year-old that sits with you doing the stretching for an hour and a half every day. You will just get cross. So we need to focus what is important, and then we are strict. And that is in general to say, this is important and we do it. It's 10 minutes and we do it. And you can pass this message to the young boy. If you say, yes, I know that you don't need a stretching in the shoulder, but come on, let's do it. It's very difficult to convince him. So it's focus on what is important, what is essential, and make it realistic, and make it feasible in the daily life. So at this stage, that is the early ambulatory stage, what we need to focus really is the TA contractures. So it's the ankle. Keep a good range of mobility about the ankle. I don't want to replace the physiotherapist, because a few talk about the physiotherapist who has definitely more experience than me and explain exactly what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. But one important thing is that I know that it would be ideally to have a physiotherapist that does stretch exercise with the boys every day. That is not feasible and sustainable. So what we usually say is that we don't need an expert physiotherapist to stretch as soon as the parents or whoever in the family has been shown by an expert physiotherapist how to do it. And it's more important the daily activity than anything else. So ask to be shown, and they should monitor every 4 to 6 months to see if you need to adapt what you're doing, if what you're doing is correct or not. But it's important that there is the participation in the way of the boy, of the family, not only the specialist. The important point at this point is the exercise, and I would say is a very simple message. Exercise is important for all of us, also with boys with Duchenne. And for them is even more important. At this stage, they are young children, 5 to 10, they can do whatever they like to do. And I think that is important, I hope that please agree with that. But they will have a lot of restriction in their life. So if you can try not to say no to things that is not necessary to say no, I think that is important. And it's important more the activity, the mobility, they need to do things. So if they like to do something, encourage them. There are only, I think, 2 no-go, well, 1 really no-go, that is trampoline. And it's just because the type of exercise is not good and can cause actually muscle damage. And it's trampoline, but it's also do not train your boy to go up and down the stairs. Doesn't mean that you can go upstairs to pick up something that you forgot, that is very useful. But it's just do not say, oh, let's spend the next 20 minutes up and down the stairs as an exercise so you keep active. That is not a very good idea. It is going down the stairs that is not good. Or walking down the hills. But that has to be done at this stage with a reasonable approach. Say, if you want to go 5 minutes on the trampoline, what is better? Psychologically, it's better to say no or leave him 5 minutes on the trampoline, then say stop. But maybe do not buy a trampoline in the garden, because that will not be 5 minutes once a month, it will be every day. And that is where the damage is. At this stage, we spoke about bone health. So I keep the bone strong. And the main suggestion is really that they should, at this stage, the only intervention that they need is to receive the vitamin D. And it's just because, as you might know, in the UK, there is not so much sun. So that is the only recommendation. In terms of early stage, so 5 to 10-year-olds, we really do not expect to have respiratory, so breathing or cardiac problem. So the breathing at the same time, we monitor more to train them on the technique. So when we need to know how exactly they're breathing out, they know how to blow in the tube in clinic. So it's just more an exercise than anything else. But at this stage, it still should receive the pneumococcal vaccination, that is once in life or once every 10 years, depending on the trust, and annual flu jab. And therefore, the heart, we ask a full heart assessment, ECG and echo, a diagnosis every 2 years until the age of 10, and annually thereafter. At this stage, I think that it's important also to focus about other aspects, that is more some of the boys with Duchenne might have behavioral problem or learning difficulties, and it's important that these are properly assessed and addressed and the right support is put in place. And this is important because if these things are put in place at early stages, we avoid two things. First, they do not get worse. So the behavioral problem in learning do not get worse with age. And if we put a good support in place at the early phase, they actually improve and they respond well. If we don't do anything, we create that it's more difficult then to go back, and then you create a lot of frustration because they struggle at school, nobody understands why, and they just get upset, and you actually make an issue bigger than what it is. Being ready for clinical trial is more about start to think about patient registry. Is on the registry? Do I know the community? Start. Maybe this is the time when you might want to start looking in what is available in a more settled way than at the diagnosis. Talking now about the delayed ambulatory, I promise it's not so long for each phase because there are things that continue to apply and I just add what is coming up on the top of that. In the late ambulatory, the problem is the boys tend to move less, so they run less around, they struggle more, and I think that we need to monitor the side effects of steroid, but specifically at this stage is when they've been for a while, so it's when they start to compare, especially the weight gain might be an issue. The fracture might start to be an issue, and the puberty. So as when we need to have a clear monitoring of the side effects profile, because it's when the side effects might start showing. The contractor prevention become even more important. And I think that the most thing is that at this stage in the late ambulatory, you will see that the boys start walking on their tiptoes. And it's perfect for a pregnant one, actually, because you start with that. And you can't, I mean, as much as you want, you can try to say, stay on your heels, put the heels down. But the problem is that they lose this strength, and they put their tongue in this position and they naturally heel up the heels, it makes them more stability. So it makes them feel more stable. So if you tell them, put your heels down, they do this, and they think, I can't walk. I feel that I'm falling. So let them stay on the tiptoes, be functional. If they need to walk and they feel more stable, it's fine. But then is when we need to work more on the stretching, because otherwise if they heel in this position all the time, they will stuck in this position all the time. And that is where we need to concentrate. And I'm talking about the splits, I'm talking about simple things that I learned from our physiotherapists and I found very practical. It's just an incline step. So you do it like that, and it's when they brush their teeth. In theory, they should brush their teeth for at least 5 minutes, twice a day. And you have done the stretching. Next one. And all the time they can do that because it's quite useful. At this point, so in the late ambulatory thing, that the heart become more and more important, because when we might start seeing that they start developing early sign of heart involvement. And we know that if we intervene at early stage of the heart involvement, the response to treatment is definitely better. If we start to give treatment when they have a clear heart problem or a clear cardiomyopathy, the response is less obvious. Is when the clinician or the cardiologist might start suggesting, should we give ACE inhibitors and beta blockers, perindopril, enalapril, and beta blockers, so start treatment for early sign. Don't be alerted too much, because sometimes ask a question. Because sometimes we start our medication, I have a few patients that say, oh, it means that his heart is not working. I'm thinking, actually, it's fine. But we start seeing just a mild change for which we start treatment as early as possible to reverse that change. But his heart is still absolutely fine. And the next check after 6 months on treatment, actually the heart is back to normal. And that is exactly what we want to aim for. There is currently a study running about it's called the heart protection study, who's trying to investigate whether if we start the treatment, ACE inhibitor and beta blocker, before the sign of any sign of heart involvement, does this postpone or prevent the heart problem later on? And the results are related next year. At this stage is also important about endocrine issues, and particularly when, as related to the side effects of steroid mainly, so they start to be smaller for the age, and they might start showing sign of delayed puberty. And I think that it's important that that is when we start thinking about, should we start treatment with testosterone and help them to go through puberty. It's very difficult because it's not natural, and therefore, I think a mom, it's very difficult to say, oh, do I really want a grumpy teenager now, and actually I'm inducing it with steroid? But it's a good point psychologically for them when they do not go to puberty, it's a natural thing, and all the other friends are becoming adults and they lose children. So it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. And there is a clinical trial now running in Newcastle to try to really evaluate the effect of testosterone, not only on puberty, but also on quality of life, on bone, on growth, and on muscle. This is particularly a risky time for fractures, because they are still ambulatory, so they walk around, but they fall. And they can have long bone fractures, so arm and legs, or they can have vertebral fractures. In terms of monitoring, I think putting attention if they complain of back pain, especially following a fall. The current recommendation are a DEXA scan annually, and I know that the new recommendation will be a little bit more aggressive in thinking about adding more a spine X-ray to monitor vertebral fracture, because we know that we underestimate the number of vertebral fractures. So we don't do an X-ray, we don't see anything, and then 3 years later you look and you say, I have 3 old vertebral fractures that I have never picked up before. Because they might just complain, I have a little bit of back pain, nothing more major. So it's something that definitely I think that the update focus more on the risk of fractures. In terms of management, I think that for the long bone fracture at this age, be careful at the importance of the early mobilization. So sometimes we recommend a cast, but sometimes the surgery should be discussed because it might allow them to start walking again earlier. So if they fracture at this age, always discuss with your clinician and also discuss with the surgeon and the orthopedist to say what is the best approach in order to have him on his feet, back on his feet as soon as possible. If they spend at this age 3 months on caster and therefore in a wheelchair, it's very, very difficult for them to go back to their feet after. So we need to try to focus on that. In terms of vertebral fractures, if they are detected, we usually prescribe bisphosphonate, and in presence of vertebral fracture, use bisphosphonate IV really to treat the fractures and avoid future fractures. Now, stay with me, it's very long, sorry. But the early non-ambulatory, so the little boys who start using the wheelchair more and more often. So, what do we need to add to everything that we have done so far? I will emphasize this is a very difficult time for the weight. They become non-ambulatory, so they can't really use their calorie moving around. They're sitting all the time, whatever they eat, stay there. And the weight become an issue. And there are lots that around this time gain easily 1 kilo a month, 2 kilo a month. It's very, very easy. Is normal, but it's something that we need to be careful. In a way, something that we monitor is normal that when they lose the ability to walk, they gain some weight, but we need to interrupt this circle. And this is because the full family, in a way, need to adapt in terms of the diet, portion, and thinking that they do not use calories. And I know that it's really tricky because a lot of families, and being Italian, I can guarantee I can understand to say, is the only thing that you enjoy now. Food. And you are actually putting a restriction on that. So I know that is very hard. But if they gain a lot of weight, if you think about lifting the arms, if the arms become really heavy, it's very difficult. If you put a lot of weight around your chest, breathing problems, heart problems. So it's a very crucial thing. And if we lose control for 1 year around this age, then it's very difficult to go back. That is the time when we need to put attention on that. The physiotherapy images here are different because they are starting not walking. So it's not only about the ankle, but we might want to start around the hip, we want to start around the wrist, and we want to try to see if there is anything that we can do in order to keep them standing. And can be scaffolds that are with support, or then can be a standing frame. And the importance is because is this best stretching. If you sit on a wheelchair all the time, that is the position. If you stand, you stretch. And you stretch the ankle, the hips, the knee in one go. The other thing is for the spine. Protect the spine from going into maintain the muscle, the trunk muscle work. But then is also the spine. When you start using the wheelchair, please be careful on the spine. We know that steroids reduce the incidence of spine deformities, so the scoliosis, that is the curve in this direction, but it still happens. And the two things, I think the standing is very important to prevent that, and ensure that a good posture. I know that, we all know, and I will test you now, we don't need to sit like that, it's very bad for our back. And we always do that. And the same is the child, or now the young man, I'm comfortable like that. And you say, come on, it's comfortable like that. That is when the spine then stays like that and become very difficult. So I tend to be a little bit obsessive about it. At these stages when they might start to develop respiratory problems, so problem with their breathing. So alerts. Usually if they start having a problem with the breathing is when they are lying, so when they sleep. And the reason of that, because of the position of the chest, is more difficult to move the muscle because they need to move anti-gravitary, if you are lying. And the second is because we breathe slower when we sleep, is natural. So if the young man or the boy starts to have morning headaches, they stop having breakfast, they are particularly grumpy in the morning, which is very difficult to assess in teenage. They fall asleep during the afternoon, or they snore a lot, or they are different. What is that? If they've always been grumpy, I'm sorry for you. But if they suddenly become grumpy, it's something we need to be worried about. And then is when they need a closer check of the respiratory function. It can be the breathing test in sitting and in lying, or it can be the overnight pulse oximetry, so the machine that you put on your finger and monitor how you breathe overnight. In some centers, it's more a sleep study. At this stage, I always think, please, it's a very difficult time for the boys because, unfortunately, what I found very difficult in Duchenne, and this is what steroid and treatment really should make a difference sooner or later, is that they tend to have the worst deterioration in their mobility, so they lose the ability to walk, at the teenage and puberty time. And for all of us, becoming a teenager or going through puberty is a very difficult time. And for them, they have these things like what we all experience in the difficulties, plus they are getting worse. And I can't really remember what I was thinking when I was a teenager, but in a way, is when you try to figure out who you will be, what I will do, and it's very, I don't know, you feel very insecure. And for them is, I'm planning to do what I want to be, and I'm actually becoming less and less mobile. And it's when it's more difficult. And unfortunately, these two things combine. So at this point, I think really thinking, people and I, about how they're doing, how is their general well-being, their mental health. It's not a question, are depressed. All of us will be, it's tricky. I had a discussion with the boy to say, 2 points, to say, I've given to 3 appointments over the last 6 months, and they told me that my breathing is worse, my heart is worse, and my mobility is worse. Wouldn't you be depressed? Yes, I would. And the second thing they told me, they say, and anyway, I'm frustrated because I can't do what I want to do, but I can't really punch on the wall because I don't have the strength to actually do it. So we need to think about it. It is normal. We need to accompany them in this process. And it's difficult. And it's difficult for the young man, and it's difficult for the parents. In the late non-ambulatory, we do everything that we have done, but obviously physiotherapy, they become less and less mobile, so we need really to help them to maintain the joint mobility. And the tricky part here is that at the time when the physiotherapist will be more important, and then is when realistically you have less access through the NHS, because they are adults and therefore they don't need physiotherapy. Or if they have access to the physiotherapist to the NHS, it's 6 weeks a year, which is totally useless. So is an important component, but is when try to find strategies for which they can stretch themselves independently as much as possible, or try to have the parents or a carer involved in the stretching. And become more, joints become more important, and there I focus really on the wrist and the fingers so they can maneuver their wheelchair. The respiratory management is when they might actually really show sign of nocturnal hypoventilation, that is a respiratory problem, that they start to have headaches in the morning, eat less, become grumpy again, even if they are older. And also monitor whether they have frequent chest infections. Actually, if I think, and I know that you forget, but I actually had 3 chest infections over the last winter, quite a lot. or they can't really cough, so are things that now we need to start monitoring. In terms of management, there are different approaches. You can think about non-invasive ventilation to help them, and quite often it's at night, because the problem that I put at the beginning, that they are lying. And therefore, if you help them breathing during the night, then during the day they're absolutely fine. They're not running the marathon, so they just need to sit. They don't need a perfect respiratory function. But if they cannot breathe well during the night, they are exhausted during the day, and then is when they struggle. So it's important to provide support. I know that it's scary, but it's the machine in the evening to make them be more functional during the day. And we have two machines, CPAP and BPAP. CPAP is more when they have nocturnal apnea, and BPAP is more when the muscle are weak to help them breathing. I will always emphasize again, there are other talk about the respiratory problems, but it is about using the cough assist machine. And the cough assist machine is to help them clearing their chest, but is also is part of the physiotherapy. When they are young, they stretch their arms and their ankles. When they are older, they stretch their chest. It's the physiotherapy for the chest. And then you might consider, in some cases, or discuss with the team about the antibiotics prophylaxis. At this stage, we need to check weight, but more often, if they are still on steroids, it's still weight gain, as I mentioned before. But please, at this stage, what we really need to monitor is the loss of weight. That is not a decision. They start to have more difficulty feeding themselves, so without realizing that they just do not eat enough, because they get tired, or take ages. Everybody's finished, and I'm still on the third bite. I just give up. They might start to have some swallowing problems, or so if they start coughing when they eat, or they have any episode of choking, it's something that we need to monitor. It's true that you don't need a lot of calories, but the brain still needs some calories. So if they start not eating well, their body becomes weaker, and they tend to have more of a chest infection, and they have more complication. And we know that the feeding problem might become the very high risk factor. So if they start losing weight, they start eating less, please ask for medical attention. I almost finished, promise, and is what I think that is important is a comprehensive. You can't just focus on one. Involve the full system, and all of the things has to work together in order to make it functional better. And this is really what the standard of care is about. Few points, step by step. So I was giving this talk, and it's about all of that, from 0 to adulthood, but is take step by step. I don't know where your boy, your son, or your young man is, so you don't need to have all of this information. You take what you need, and then you move on to the next one when you're ready for that. But it's important that the MD change over time, and we need to be ready for that. And to have things put in place might take a long time, so we need to anticipate things. And therefore, we need to adjust their needs. But I used this one also last year actually, and also I think the year before. Is about, please remember, is your soul. It's not just about Duchenne. It's about well-being and quality of life of your boy, or your son, and by yourself. And it's not about what we prescribe. You have to do A, B, C, D, F, G. If you struggle, the only thing that I can advise, if you struggle to follow the standard of care, discuss with your clinician. Don't say, oh yes, I do it, because you feel guilty. There is nothing. It's easy for me to say everything, but I don't have a child or a boy or a young man with me with Duchenne. So it's easy for me to advise. But then you need to put it in the context of your routine. And if you struggle, please always openly discuss that. And we say, okay, we can't do that, which is the ideal, fine. Let's try to do something else. And we probably find a solution that is better than nothing. Or we find a way that we have learned from other family, how do they manage? Or discuss, if you don't want to be their clinician, discuss with other family. There are other solutions. We can't be, it's too easy to say you need to do A, B, C, D, buy. If you don't, it's your problem. And with this, I finish. I have prepared a few questions that I would like you to answer. But I also want to leave a little bit of time for open questions if you want. You want to ask questions first? We want to go for the quiz?
Who's first?
Who's first? Okay. One thing, might be one right answer. Oh, I should have separated, so please read only the first one. But might be one right answer, might be 2 or 3 or 4, so all of them might be right, only one might be right, might be that none of them is really right. So there is not marking here. But the first question is, and I need a volunteer to answer. So, when should we start following standard of care? When my social shows weakness, when my son starts using wheelchair, when my son starts school, or when my son is diagnosed?
4.
Yeah. Where do I find information? I think that is important to say, because that is where we start and become familiar. The other ones would say when you show weakness. It is true that there are so many interventions that we need to do before they show weakness, but it's a work around the family and put things in place. Otherwise, everything will be late. Where do I find information about standard of care?
4.
3 and 4.
In a way, 1, 2, 3, 4.
3, 4.
Exactly, all the 4. But the point is that Google you can find everything on Google. So I can't say no, you can't find information about Duchenne on Google. You can. Be careful what you look at, because Google, everybody can add things in Google. And one, for example, if you Google it, there is a video, it's a beautiful video about Duchenne, and there's this boy that's linked to obviously YouTube, and there's a beautiful video of Duchenne, and I think it was in Sweden or in Germany, was 15 years ago or 20 years ago, pre-steroid, pre-standard of care. And it's not that it's wrong, but it's not applied now. So if you look at that, you have the wrong step. But you can find information. I always think I'm a clinician, so I always hope, please, go to your clinician with questions. And challenge them. Sometimes, for us it's easy to think, this is my job. I just see children and adults with neuromuscular diseases and with Duchenne. Easy, I'm an expert, easy to be an expert. Some centers is the neuromuscular specialist actually a pediatrician who also see epilepsy and everything else. And Duchenne is just a little component of what they do. Are they less good than me? No. It's just that they have less time to dedicate that. So challenge them, because sometimes the clinicians say, I read this, and say, oh, let me have a look. I don't have any clue. But let me have a look. Give me a chance to provide care. And don't judge them because they don't have time. It's the reality. Action Duchenne website definitely provide information about Duchenne, and there are also other, like MD UK or Duchenne UK website. There are several patient organizations who has a website that include information about Duchenne. And the TreatMD website provide information about Duchenne, but also of other kind of information. So I think that are good sources for information. Should we stop steroid when my son is no longer able to walk? Yeah. Please not depend on the region where we live, although sometimes it is. Okay? And that is why I put it, because it's when they move to the adult. We are working in order to create an adult North Star network in order to harmonize the care also in adults. A little bit behind, but we are working on it. And it's really dependent on side effects. So again, challenge the neurologist. I am a neurologist in origin, and I think that you can find some good people there. How often do I do stretching with my son? Every day, once a week, only when he asks. I should not do the stretching as they need to be delivered by an expert physio. Yes. One thing, I know that it's difficult here. Our physio always said, we don't give breaks in brush. They need to brush their teeth 7 days a week. So they need to do the stretching 7 days a week. My point is very difficult sometimes, but my point is never prize them to say, oh, you've been a good boy today, so you don't need to do the stretching. Because it's the wrong message. The stretching is not something that you do as a punishment. It's something that you do because it's a good thing to do. So it's more working on this child management. When should my son start a stretching exercise? When he shows joint contractures, when he starts using a wheelchair, as soon as diagnosed, advised by the physio.
3.
4 for I mean, it's a good thing that it's better 3 than obviously 1 or 2. And I would say yes, in general, as soon as diagnosed. At the same time, a lot of the boys, especially in the UK, because it's something that is common in England, have when they are little, they have joint hyperlaxity. So their joints are actually really, really flexible. And that might be one of the reasons they struggle from a good mobility point of view. But in that case, it's a compromise. But depending on the behavior, you might want to start the stretching anyway to get into the habit, but they might not need it. Sometimes if they are not need, maybe we can just save them for a few years of stretching, for 1 year or 2 years of stretching. So I will say, ask the physio when is the right time. Which part of the body should we stretch? Yes, right. Can my son receive national recommended vaccination per age? It becomes more difficult because I didn't mention it. Yes, at any time, not at any time, depends on whether he's on steroid or not, or depends on the type of vaccine. 3 and 4. Because if he is on a steroid, his immune system might be suppressed, and therefore he should not receive live vaccines. If he's not on steroid, he can also receive the live vaccine. One important thing is that it's changing because we are starting steroid earlier, that the national recommended vaccination are usually done at, I can't remember now, at the age of 1 and then preschool. But the national vaccination done in preschool are still live vaccines, so these should be done before starting steroid. So it's something that you need to discuss with the clinician and keeping up to date in terms of the vaccination. One point that I want to put, I thought that I had a question, I can't remember. I might have a question that I read now, but is regarding the flu jab, is a question that we received several times. If they are on steroid, they need to receive the injection and not the nasal spray. The nasal spray is a live vaccine, the injection there. Which diet should my son follow?
4.
I would say probably the best one is a balanced diet, but depending on some stages, the low-calorie diet. I agree with you. So it depends a little bit on where we stand or of the boys. In general, definitely not a high-calorie diet. It has to be adapted to their mobility, but definitely a balanced diet. There are a lot of studies, more than the high-carbohydrates diet is about high protein, because there are these theory muscle are made of protein, so if you give a lot of protein, it can't harm. When they test it, then it does not make any difference. And we need to be careful not to overload of protein because it becomes dangerous for the liver, for the kidney, especially in the young one. So I would say balanced diet, including protein, is the best option. Your son's urine is very dark, like Coca-Cola. What do you do?
1 and 3.
Sorry, yeah, you've read my
1 and 3.
1 and 3. I would say you start to inject, that is what we call myoglobinuria. The advice that we usually give in terms of management of myoglobinuria is, if it happens,